The push and pull of life can wear even on the most steadfast of people. The ups, the downs, the entire state of the world right now. Now, I could be referring to the world's current events, of course, but I'm actually referring to today's video game genre of Sokoban, which is pushing boxes in a grid to specific storage locations to solve a puzzle. This is also me attempting to be clever after feeling like my brain has been bashed against the wall for hours at a time after playing today's game. After Light Fades releases today, June 20th, 2025, for the price of $14.99. It's available on the PC, specifically Steam, and is developed by Orchard of Redemption, which is based out of Australia. It's a puzzle game that may cause you an aneurysm, or it may be the exact challenge that you were looking for. It has tremendous highs, and some frustrating lows. But before I begin this review properly, this key was obtained from PlayIndies, a PR company, for the purposes of review. That won't change my opinion of the game in the end, but you should know that because of FTC guidelines, as well as the whole morals thing, you know? After Light Fades has you taking control of Alice, who finds her partner being lost due to mysterious fire. Somehow, through the magic of this world, I'm actually not sure, 7 resident artifacts are created after the tragedy. Alice then goes on a journey to take these 7 artifacts to her partner and her's favorite places, to basically do the equivalent of a ritual, which seems to imply something right out of the Edward Elric playbook. Now, let me be clear of something from the get-go. If you're expecting a lot of interactions in the story, which is sort of something I got the impression on based on the Steam store page, you're probably not gonna get it here. I say probably because, as you see in the title here, it's a first impressions and I completed approximately 30% of the game, and there's only been a couple of story segments. Not many. And despite one of my favorite games of all time being a visual novel, aka Valhalla Cyberpunk Bartending Simulator, I was hoping for a little bit more than just writing, a little bit of presentation, maybe a little bit of a visual cutscene. The writing is fine, but it's not the main draw here, and honestly, I started to get lost in the words because of the storybook presentation in terms of, turning the page. It just didn't work for me. But this is a puzzle game, right? So let's dig into the puzzles. If you don't know what a traditional Sokoban game is, it's a game where you have to push a series of boxes to unlock, flip a switch, basically find a way to get to an exit and leave the level. In this case, it's usually unlocking a door through a key switch, and almost all the levels that I completed basically follow this formula in some way. There are of course rules that you have to follow like any other puzzle game, and they're very specific and numerous in this one. Certain tiles can be pulled, others can be pushed, and some have specific behaviors when interacting with one another or the environment itself. For example, the most basic one is the key, which can only be pulled, but can also pull the North Star block. It's also that one that unlocks the exit, sort of the linchpin of everything. Meanwhile, the North Star block can be pushed and can push the key block. So, simple rules, right? Yeah, that's the simple ones. Then you get things like Earth. You can push away Earth, as both your character will move one tile back, and the Earth tile will be pushed one tile forward. It can fill holes in the ground so that you can use that location. It can also be destroyed by bombs. Oh, and it can swap with rocks. Oh, and it can be made into a North Star by a crystal, and destroyed by flower. This is all with one tile, by the way. The idea here is that you need to use the combination of different tiles and their abilities to make your way around the map and complete the level, and that is not easy. See, the rules are very specific to the layout of the level. So for example, if you push the North Star block against a wall, either you've made it so that it's stuck on the wall and you can't get it out, remember you can't pull that block by yourself, or you need some sort of interaction, like the key, in order to recover it. Which leads me to one of my first big criticisms of the game: easing the player into its rules, especially for someone inexperienced in Sokoban. Sokoban games are a different style of puzzle game in analyzing how you find a solution to the puzzle. You're analyzing pathways in conjunction with the rules in order to determine what's a good move and what's not. That is a skill that takes time to cultivate in my experience, and After Light Fades does initially do an okay job in the first few levels. Then it starts becoming a bit more difficult, and I can see players immediately start to become frustrated when they hit this wall. One of the keys, at least in my opinion, regarding level design of those early levels is that you need to give a little bit more flexibility when it comes to the solution to allow the players to experiment and understand the mechanics, which usually means a bit more open areas to get used to the push and pull mechanics. You'll need areas that will force you to learn a specific lesson, of course, because you need to get certain ideas into the player's head, but those choke points should have more areas where a solution is needed before that has a couple of ways to get through it. You see, as hallways and areas become narrower, the amount of mistakes that you can make significantly decreases, or you end up in a no-win scenario. And sometimes After Light Fades seemingly has this on the surface, but a good amount of the time, that's misleading due to the multiple steps needed for a solution, usually needing steps X, Y, and Z with no variance to get through it. Let me show you an example. A prime example of a level where I think the mechanics come a little bit too quickly and don't allow for flexibility is this level. This is a level that introduces multiple mechanics all at once. It introduces trees, which allow mana to be drawn out and draw certain items, and rivers, which allows you to move without necessarily moving, and also forces movement in the stream movement, aka I'm moving down because the stream is moving this way. Now, on the surface, this looks great because you're learning specific things. There's a little bit of an area open here, and I can experiment with things. Oh, hey, look, I was able to move the plant over. And I know that I'm going to need that plant to do this. Okay, great. I also know that just based off of experience, that I'm going to need to push this crystal here to unlock the North Star. And then get it out of the way because it's not going to be needed anymore. And I'm going to need that key over here. Because I'm going to need the key to get into this one slot, that lock up there. But here's the problem. So I've got this key. And I'm going to move it into a location that I think I'm going to need it to. Because obviously I can't pull the key into that area, but I can do certain other things. Like, as you can see there, that seems like it would be the right move, right? I push with the North Star, push the key over, and the key will be right there. There's just one problem. Even though I'm not necessarily wanting the tree to activate, I'm next to a tree. So if I push it, oh, it pulled the key over based off the mana. That's one of the mechanics that the game has. And you'll notice there's not a lot of room to manipulate. So even if I did it, let's say, here, there it would be fine. If I did it here, same problem. Because if I push it here, then, oh, all of a sudden, it's right here again. Now, there is a saving grace here. That being an undo button, which has no restrictions, and you can undo any move, even 100 moves ago, although you have to undo every move that came after that. The downside of it in this game, because on the surface, okay, be able to undo and experiment over and over again, is that one, the game doesn't tell you about the undo button. I assumed it was there when I started to get into no-win situations, but if it told you about it, I didn't see it. I just assumed that because it was a Sokoban game, it had to have it. It should have really taught you that to begin with. But two, a lot of these puzzles are very, very extensive. There are puzzles that you have what I think are 300 and 400 moves. When you're having to undo certain combination of things to the point where you're having to undo maybe half of what you've done in order to get one thing in the right place, part of me wonders if a checkpoint system, like, oh, maybe I can save this state so that I can go back to it, would have been more better for what was expected here, because there were times where I'm just smashing the undo button because I have to get back to a certain spot. With all that said, you may think I have a negative outlook on the game, and that's not the case. See, combination of different tiles and puzzles did bring the challenge here, and it did exactly what I'd want in the end, giving me that feeling of triumph when I've spent 20 minutes bashing my head on a puzzle that I just couldn't see the solution for. That's the highlight of puzzle games to me, pushing the logic and forcing me to think outside the box, and After Light Fades certainly does that. If you want a challenge as a puzzle game player, you will get it here. I think the combination tiles here that have multiple different uses and behaviors are creatively put together, even if they can be frustrating to learn at first. That mana tree one was causing me to curse and yell out, but when I completed it, I was also yelling out in success. That's the dilemma about this game, and one that I'm still struggling with when it comes to my overall opinion. I do wish the game had a hint system, some way of poking the player to go to focus on a specific placement of a tile, for example. But I won't sit here and say that the struggle doesn't add to the accomplishment. I'm focusing on that sort of frustration factor because I don't think this game is going to be great for players who are new to the puzzle genre or even intermediate, because there are a lot of hurdles to get through in terms of that frustration factor. For example, there are branching paths in this game, despite the fact that most of the branches are optional content. It's not your main sort of like focused puzzle content in terms of the story. But if you run across a puzzle on the main path that you just cannot figure out, either you're going to have to look up a walkthrough if it's available, and by the way, I didn't exactly have that for this playthrough, but you're just going to have to throw yourself at it over and over again if you don't want to use a solution guide. You can't skip it to go to another puzzle that you may be able to figure out. And even with that said, I understand that thought to a certain extent. There are concepts that you're going to need to learn in this game that if you skip over one, it may be a problem for you. With that said, getting stuck on one puzzle is going to be a nightmare, especially for a reviewer who was trying to actually review this whole game and kept on getting stuck over and over and over and over and over again. Part of the wish of that skip element is the fact that I wanted to see a little bit more of what the game had to offer because of the fact it seemed to have more under the surface. At the start, you find these skulls that seem to give you spells based on a movement pattern, and that seems interesting to me. Could I use those spells in specific situations? Like, in the early puzzles, they don't seem to do anything, but maybe there's an alternate path that is interesting to see if, oh, maybe I should try this spell. Maybe I can, unlock a new ending. Like, that idea in a puzzle game is very rare, and I like that idea. I like the idea of that branching narrative and path. It's just that, unfortunately, because of the roadblocks, I never got to see it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I am a smart person. I think I am higher up there in terms of puzzle games and percentage completed. I am a computer scientist. I am a software engineer, and I think my logic element is pretty reasonable. With that said, I was struggling with this game in terms of trying to figure out some of the solutions. And so when I'm sitting there and I'm like, is it worth it? I could see other people immediately being like, nope, not going to try it. Granted, that does change if there are solutions available online, like I said before, but, to each their own. As for things like the presentation, I think it's all right. Granted, there are little things that bother me here. The visual cues in terms of doing things like undo and movement, I feel like they needed a little bit more flair in terms of seeing your move. Sometimes those visual indicators can really help a player in terms of understanding what they're doing. I know that sounds weird, but sometimes you get into that sort of like I know what I'm doing, so I'm going to keep on moving and not realizing what I'm actually doing. And those little visual indicators can help, especially if you accidentally make a mistake. I do like the look, especially the foresty look, the sort of, I don't want to say druid look, but like the ruin slash, sort of decayed world look. And obviously that could change as you go along. This is in the first third of the game, but I do like it. There are times that I do wish, though, that the game would use the puzzle screen a little bit more effectively. There were certain areas in which you were using only a third of the screen, and while it's nice to see the other 2/3 and it be a cohesive world, the fact is that they also look like elements that could be in the field of play with some of the forest elements, with, the mossy rock and stuff like that. So it is a little bit annoying that I have to sort of squint and be like, wait, is that in the field of play? Can I move something into that area? Because there were times where, yes, I could move it into an area, and yet it wasn't necessarily 100% clear from the get-go. Maybe a highlight button to say these are, actual tiles? I'm not going to go into music and sound as much in this video because I think it's secondary here. You're really focusing on the puzzles, and while the little sound indicators can help, they aren't there to really enhance the system right now, at least in my opinion. They're there to, give it a little bit of flavor in terms of like moving a tile and things like that, but overall, it could be a little bit better. So I've talked for about 18 minutes in this video about my positives and negatives about the game. And if you look at the time that I've talked about it, most of them have been negatives. So obviously I'm not going to recommend the game, right? No. Here's the thing. If you are a hardcore puzzle player, if you are someone who loves puzzle games, you loved Baba Is You, you love games that, make you sweat in terms of your thought process, this game will do that for you. Granted, there are things that will make you a little bit upset, but in the end, you're looking for that high of I'm smarter than the game. This game most assuredly does that. Now, for intermediate puzzle players, this will be something that you'll probably want to keep an eye on. Granted, it is a perfect kind of game to go back and maybe play a level and then maybe forget about it and then come back to it, or, play a little at a time. But it does have some elements that you'll want to keep an eye on, especially some of those changes and hints that I would recommend for the developer to put into it, as well as a level editor. That could take it to a whole new level, especially with some of the creative people out there. For a beginning puzzle player, hell no. There are just too many hurdles for that type of player to get into this game. And the fact is that I haven't played all of it. I haven't seen the later portions of it, but there's just too many roadblocks for those new players or even those casual players that I can honestly recommend the game at. Normally, I do a scoring system, but the fact is that I don't think it applies here for buyability because I don't feel confident for that end game portion. I'm giving you my thoughts on it, but, you know, what I've played. Anyway, that's it for these first impressions. Now, coming up, I will be looking at the schedule in terms of what I will do review-wise next. I'm going to get more on getting a schedule together, and I'll probably post that in a video, but I'm working on the 100-line review. I will say this. I will not finish the 100-line review until I do all the endings. It is my game of the year at this point. It may be... I don't want to say they're one of the best games I've played, but it may be up there. There's a lot to like about it. And I will say this. If you need a recommendation whether or not to play it. Buy it, play it, enjoy it. But I think the amount of work that was put into it with all the elements of the story that was put into it needs a deeper dive, and I think I need to see all the endings for that, and well, that's going to take a while. I will be streaming more on Twitch, especially indies, and that'll be it for now. And as always, keep on gaming.